Good evening, everyone. This is our series of webinars that we've been having regularly. Thanks for joining again. Just some housekeeping. Everybody is in mute mode, so I'll not be able to hear what you guys are saying. But the chat lines are open, so Praveen from our sales team is monitoring the chat lines constantly. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them there. I will be opening the floor at the end for about 15 minutes for questions. The focus of today's webinar is primarily on forms automation. What we want to showcase today is how we do forms. This is primarily focused for the Ontario market. So this webinar is purely for Ontario. So we will be focusing mainly on Ontario forms. So to kick off the webinar, what we will be talking about is what is process automation in practice management, and then we'll take into details how the software has actually automated many of your stuff, ranging all the way from intake documents to court forms to financial automation. So we'll talk about the whole range of automation. We'll focus a lot our conversation around forms automation. So what can forms automation overall bring to your business is it can bring a lot of efficiency. A lot of forms, in the court or even your regular day-to-day, what you're filling is very cookie-cutter information. You enter it once, it'll be done again and again, so errors can be phenomenally, reduced. Also, if you have a larger workforce, where you are working and you have other assistants, you do it once and then they are producing the forms, the chances of they making mistakes, everything is also substantially reduced. A big efficiency factor is also there, but on top of it, there's compliancy factor as well. When you get the forms filled by a software, it'll do the right things at the right place, ask you the right questions. So when the form is actually being filled, most of the things are pre-populated. Okay? Now, with that in mind, I'm going to jump right into the demo. What we're going to do today is we'll create a client. We'll take a simple, we'll take a range of a matter here. We'll take a small claims matter, a family matter. We can even look at some other sectors like WSIB, POA, Landlord and Tenant. We'll look at a range of forms that that the software supports, and we will go through each of them. So the first and foremost thing that you would do in the software is you would actually create your client. To do that, you would click on the new contacts, and then you will add a client. So in this case, I'm going to create a client. Let's say her name is Sally Sandra, and let's say she works for a company, Sally Incorporation. Her job title is VP of Sales, and her home address is 81 King Street. Let's say she's from Ottawa, Ontario, and that's her home address. You can see Canada, and you can give a postal code. And maybe that's her mailing address, so you can mark that one. Now, you can add more addresses, for example, her work address. Now, it's pretty important to take all this information and fill it right here, because not only it'll help you, in normal contact process of practice management, but also forms need these information. So let's say she's in 82 Queen Street, and that's, in the neighboring city of Nepean, and that's also in Ontario, and that's her work address, Canada, again, K2K, 4Q, and that's not, the mailing address is the home. Now, similar concept applies to phone, so you can say the 613-223, let's say home is your home phone, and similarly a 613-444 work is her work address. And you can similarly put email and other information. And you can also hit the save button. So once you have hit the save button, what the software does is it creates a client for you. So at this stage, the first step is to do conflict check. That's not mainly part of this webinar, so I'm going to skip that. And let's actually get into the job of actually creating a matter for this. So when you create a matter, there are two important aspects that needs to be captured as part of matter workflow. One is the matter title. So let's say it's Sally versus Fred is the matter title, and you can mark what kind of matter it is. So let me say this one is a family matter. Okay. So let's say we mark it as a family matter, and then maybe it's a divorce matter. So you can say save, and I'll go through this for every other matter as well. So once you mark it as save, now you need to go and mark Sally as what she is. So when you go back to contact, you can label Sally as what group she belongs to. Like, for example, in the family law, she's either an applicant or a respondent, so let's mark her as an applicant. Similarly, when we create Fred, we can mark him as a respondent. So if I go to respondent here, I'll already see I have several respondents. Maybe I can create one. I can say new respondent, and let's say it is Fred Sandra, and he is at say 90 King Street, and he's also in Ottawa, Ontario. And I'm going to just skip the rest, but the idea is to create the opponent here. Now, once you mark your client as an applicant in family, and we'll walk through other scenarios like small claims and other things later. Now, the forms is very simple. So the way we do that is you just go to Matter, and you click on Document Generation, Forms, Family. You say what kind of court, whether it is Superior Court or whatever court, and then you can say what kind of form you're doing, and then here you can say Fred, and maybe they have a child. You can ask that if they don't have one, and then you can say Ottawa. Now, if I had put the claim number here, it automatically populated. Let's say this is the claim number, and you hit the download button. Now the software knows this is a family matter, and it's related to an applicant. Associates Fred automatically as a respondent, takes the form from Ontario for family, and fills it out. That's it. So it's as simple as that. The software automatically realizes the relationship, the information you're given, the context, and starts filling in all the details for you. So I'm going to open this form, and you'll now see that the software has actually gone ahead and filled in most of the details. There you go. So the Court of Justice, the applicant information, your information, respondent's information, everywhere where the file number needs to be populated. I had not put things like date of birth and all that stuff, but if I'd indicated all that, it would have calculated the age, the date of birth, everything would be. So that's for the family side of practice. So that's where, a simple form for family law can just be achieved in uLaw by just clicking the forms, then going ahead and just filling them out. Before we jump into other silos of practice, as you saw here, the software supports small claims, landlord and tenant, POA, WSIB. We're now actually introducing, auto insurance claim forms, SABS as well. So before we get into each of these, I would like to talk about other forms of automation that the software can actually bring, and then we'll jump back into court forms. Now, if I look at the bookkeeping guidelines for Ontario, you can either open the lawyers or the paralegals. It's all the same. When you open that, and if you actually look at certain sections of the bookkeeping guidelines for compliance, if you notice, they have forms there too. Like, for example, every time you get a client, you need to actually fill in this information by bylaw. Now, we consider this a form too. So for us, because you've given all the information, you can click on document generation, client ID verification, because that's the form. And now, as soon as you hit the download, we exactly know what form you're actually talking based on the jurisdiction. We'll fill that out for you. I'm going to place the two next to each other. So that's what the Law Society is actually asking you to do. This is what uLaw has actually filled out. Now, this is a lawyer version of the bookkeeping guidelines. I'll also open a paralegal version of the bookkeeping guidelines. And you'll see that the compliance for these things, especially the bookkeeping, is pretty much the same. It's all like, it's the same thing. And the way we have constructed these forms is we made them compliant, and you can edit them. Like, for example, you can just say driver's license is what I'm picking, maybe, another document. You can give the number. Technically, some of our clients, best practice, what they do is they print these forms because it's a good habit to actually print them. And what they do is they photocopy the driver's license or whatever they have on the back side of it. So that way you're not only compliant, but you also have the other information if you're actually subjected to an audit. Okay. So that's another form of automation that we bring. Now, the same concept we bring in for other efficiency, like, for example, conflict screening. If you do conflict screening, the Law Society's form, we brought it out as a form that's, again, fairly filled in. So you can say who was the person who took the call, the person making contact. Here's all the information that we've already given. In this case, you can say that was a new client. Now, everything that we haven't been able to fill, you can fill. So you can say there was no conflict. Retainer was not declined. You can type the reason why, right? And actually, if you're using PDF, you can even sign this one and be done with it. Now, next level of form automation that we will talk about is some of the authorization letters. Like now, if you're doing landlord and tenant or family law or civil litigation, you need to actually represent yourself as a client in other places that are not court. So we've kind of templatized those kind of forms too, like, for example, authorization letters that you will need. So you can just get a couple of signatures from the client right now so that you can fill in the to's and the re's later. Similar automation has been brought for retainer letters, non-engagement letters, and all these kind of different kinds of letters, like closing letters, reporting letter of will, disposition. We have so many samples of retainers. For example, you want to do a retainer engagement sample, you can just hit the download button. Again, fill out most of what it knows, the scope of an engagement. To us, this is a form too, because we consider what we know we have already filled in. What we don't know, we have left it as a blank. Like, for example, if there's a contingency fee, you can actually say, yeah, it's 35%. You can just mark that, right, and move on. So we kind of realized how the practice of law works, and we're trying to templatize those forms as well. Now, getting back to our original thing of court form, before I actually do that, I want to quickly show you one other automation that we bring, which is very important, which is called trust forms. Like, for example, if this client gave you a small retainer of, say, $450, right, and you actually charge the client, say, $300 of invoice, and you did a trust transfer, you need to fill a form called Form 9A in Ontario. So let's say you did an initial client meeting, just one, and it was about 2.3 hours, and hit the save button. I'm going to quickly invoice you and raise and do a trust transfer, and I'll show you how the software automatically will force you for a Form 9A. So if you do invoice, and I'm going to choose the nice uLaw theme here. I'm going to mark this one as paid because I'm going to do a trust transfer. And let me quickly do an invoice. And hit the download button. So that's going to give me the invoice. Once the invoice is actually there, you are eligible to actually do what we call a trust transfer. Right? This is an invoice for $389.85. You actually go to the software and hit this question mark. It'll actually tell you what you can do. It tells you that you can transfer $389 from trust. I'm going to hit the transfer button. And I'm going to actually do a transfer. So when you do a transfer from my trust account into my Royal Bank account, I can mark this payment as electronic fund transfer. Now, if you would pause in the software, go to your RBC, do the transfer for $389, and put the requisition number here. Hit the transfer button. The software will pause, basically because it knows that there's a form that you need to fill here, and that's called Form 9A. You pull out Form 9A, and you say, oh, that's my debit account, like RBC. That's my credit account, and I can say this is RBC Trust, right? And hit the download button. Now, this is another form. It's not a court form, but it's an audit form. And we realize that this needs to be filled. So here again, 389, Sally versus Sandra, and what's the matter, all your trust information, who did the transfer, everything is filled out. So again, with compliance to what the Law Society is asking you on Form 9A, is Form 9C, 9B, 9A. Here you go. So with respect to what the Law Society is actually asking you, we fill this form pretty much automatically. So quickly to summarize, before I go back to court forms, the software automates not just court forms, but process forms as well. We believe that client ID verification, conflict screening, retainer letter, these are all process forms. We automate all that along with accounting compliancy forms like Form 9A, and on top of it, we also automate court forms. So now let's go to another example of, say, a small claims court. So I'm going to mark this exact same matter. I'm going to make this a small claims matter. So let me say this one was a small claims matter. Hit the save button. Obviously, I need to decide what kind of small claims this is. Like, is she a plaintiff or a defendant? So I can go back to the contact. Again, search for Sally. And that is Sally Sandra. And if I click on the group button, it tells me that this client has already been marked as a client and an applicant. You can label now her as a plaintiff. Similar to the way I created respondent for family law, you can create defendants, and you can create other representatives too, like, people whom you're going to meet in the court. Once you've done that using the new contact method, you go back to the matter. Small claims is just 2 or 3 clicks. You can say document generation, forms, small claims, and you'll first choose the date, then choose the form. So in this case, because I marked it as a plaintiff, let me do a plaintiff claim. Here I can pick the defendant. So let's say I choose Johnny Cash. Then I can choose the representative. Let's say it is Judy Sylvester. And then, again, Ottawa Courthouse. And again, I forgot to fill the court file number here, but next time I'll do that. But if I put the court file number here and hit the download button, the software is now going to look for basically Form 7A, which is a plaintiff claim. It exactly knows all the cookie cutter information that it needs to fill. It's going to take it from your software and just start filling its way. Now, small claim forms, like family forms, are also Word, so it's going to pull out a doc form. So if you actually had Word, it will basically fill it out, and here are the instructions, and it starts filling its way through. Now, there are several options that we offered on the way, and let me look at each of them. First and foremost, if you go to the settings, under the forms, you can fill out your LSUC number, okay, or your some kind of your license number. If you don't want the client's address to be filled, you want to actually leave it empty because, like, sometimes you want the correspondence to actually head towards the representative. You can actually choose yes. Some people prefer filling forms fully in capitals, so you can say yes to that. Those are some of the setting options. Now, in terms of the matter options, the following are the options here. So let me put the court file number here. That I'm going to show. Let me do a garnishment statement or something like that. So in terms of options for filling out the form, certain ones are mandatory, and they'll be marked in red. For example, when you go to small claims, the court house is mandatory. Let's say you're representing him in Brampton, you have to choose one of the Brampton courthouse. So choose that. And what you could actually say, if the opponent does not have representation, you can say, hey, he or she does not have representation. In this case, let's again do, say, Form 15A, in notice of motion. Okay, and the claim number now automatically got filled in. Now, some forms have a Schedule A attachment. Now, most people like to do Schedule A attachment so that they can explain, the affidavit better. So if you want to do that, you can check this. It automatically checks it. If you don't want that, you can just uncheck it. But if you check it, you'll see that when the software generates the document, it even puts a statement there, see Schedule A. And we also have a sample Schedule A that I'm going to actually show you right after this. So when this is actually happening, I'm going to show you a sample Schedule A. We can go here and actually go to the bottom, and we have a sample Schedule A, same Brampton Courthouse. You can do the download. While that's happening, let me show you Form 15A. So that's Form 15A. Again, everything pretty much filled up. I said no representative, so it didn't fill in the representative information. And it filled in most of the stuff that it knew. And it leaves this, and it also fills in all these details, the commissioner details, so that you can just put your stamp. And this is one template Schedule A that we have created that you can actually use. Now let's move on to another style of, another type of form, which is I'm going to now use a landlord and tenant board. Before I do that, let me just show you how would you have done if the software did not exist. So obviously, you would go to the small claims form. These are all your forms. You can generate that, download them in either Word or PDF. So you'd click on this. That would actually download it. Then you would open it, and you would start your way from top. You would have to fill in each of these information. So I'm just going to keep the two forms, the empty one and our form next, and just compare for you how much information we've actually filled in for you. So if you look here, this page is pretty much filled up. If I go to the next page, this is what they have. Again, pretty much everything is filled up. You just need to choose which of these kinds, right? That's the only thing that's left. And this page, we have left it as open because it's an affidavit of support of motion, so you need to fill this one. So the third page, there's a little bit of work there. And the last page, again, we filled up most of the details. So if you look at this form, more than 90% of this form is actually filled out for you. Let me now go to the next silo of practice that I'm going to show you, which is landlord and tenant. Now, we keep the forms pretty much up to date. What we do is on a regular basis, we actually visit the website, and we also have a context with respect to the website, because whenever that website gets uploaded, we get notified, and we watch for when the form is actually going to be released. And within a week, we guarantee that the form will be updated. So let me now change this one to a landlord and tenant matter. Here you go. And I'm going to hit the save button. Now, once the landlord and tenant board thing is set, you need to mark again the same concept. You need to mark this one as a landlord. So you go back to the contact, pick your contact, you hit on the group button, make him or her a landlord. Then you can come back to the matter and choose the forms. Same concept, you'll hit on document generation, forms, landlord and tenant board. Now you need to choose the date, what kind of form. Okay, let's say it's an L7. You can choose, who's the opponent. Let's say it is John McCarthy and Judy Sylvester. And obviously it's filled in as it was a small claims, but the landlord and ones have the 3-letter followed by that. You can hit the download button. Now, landlord and tenant board forms are a little different. They are PDF forms, so you need to fill them using a PDF. Now, what the software does is it starts filling its way and leaves you the space. So, we actually go ahead and fill everything for you, and some of the things that we haven't filled in, you can actually go ahead and correct. Like, for example, the email address we haven't filled in. You can say valley@hotmail.com. and it will automatically do that. Now, the key difference that you saw, like, we take the effort to actually put it in every box. The landlord and tenant board forms are not that flexible, but, it's very hard to fill them. So, you have to go through the pain. I think if you actually make it capital, it might realize that. I think these forms are one of the hardest forms to fill. I think if I do this, it might space it out. No? Okay, so anyway, we are able to split it up, but the software, the forms are pretty hard to fill. But as you saw, you got the idea, like, we go ahead and fill every line and everything. So you're better off giving the information to us and making us fill it. So now once you have filled it, you can actually choose what we haven't filled, like, the credit card information and, what you want to indicate in your schedule of hearing, and you're pretty much done. Now, moving on, a similar concept has been also done for POA. So let me now mark this one now as a Highway Traffic Act matter. I'm going to change the code file number to actually an offense number. So let's change that to, say, just an Ontario offense number. Once you do that, now you can actually go ahead, choose the HTA form. You can just say HTA, choose what kind of form it is. Let me choose, say, a notice of appeal under Section 135, and hit the download button. And the software will actually go ahead and fill in as much as what it knows. So you can go and say, what kind of defense. You can fill in the information that we haven't filled in, name of the respondent, what kind of conviction it is. You can fill in all the other details. There are two new areas of practice that uLaw has introduced in the last 3 months. First one is WSIB. And we've just started introducing auto insurance claim forms as well. So I'll show you one flavor of each. And after that, we can kind of open the floor for questions. So for WSIB, again, you can mark the type. You can make this one an employment. And once you've marked it as an employment, now you can choose the form. As WSIB, we do the following forms. Let's say an intent to object. You can hit the download button, and the form should be pretty much. There you go, Sally Sandra. Now you can use these buttons as well. Like, for example, you can actually reset our entire form by just. Oh, I think it's because I'm not opening it as a PDF. I actually. Again, it is a fully editable form, so you can say it's a worker, whatever it is, and go ahead. Let me actually open that in Acrobat. You can actually apply your macros. So the drudgery of actually filling the form, is what we are trying to actually relieve here. So there's your form that's coming in from this. Now, as you know, if it's an PDF form, you can actually even apply signatures and all that stuff as well. So you can always say place signature, wherever you need to place it, do all that stuff. Now, if you want to reset the form, you can do that. So I was using Preview because I use a Mac, but if I was actually using Acrobat, all the macro functions are also available. Last and final, we have a beta version of SABS. You can just say Forms, SABS, and you can choose what kind of form it is. I'll just do the application benefit form. hit the download button. Exactly the same concept, like WSIB, but this time it starts filling these forms. There you go, the claim number, fills in all the details about your work, the information about the paralegal or the lawyer, so you can say, hey, that's what it is. As you saw, like we kind of fill in most of it, and then you take it to the next step and say, okay, I want to do that, I want to do that. So give you a good head start with respect to filling a form. The last piece with which I want to actually wind up today's call is forms are not just for court. There are other kind of forms that you need to fill as part of your practice. So, for example, if you actually open the bookkeeping guidelines, which I'm again going to open, there are guidelines on other kinds of things that you need to fill. Like, for example, you need to fill this kind of a template. We consider this also a form, a trust ledger. We look at that as well as a form because it has information, it has cookie cutter information, and you need to fill that. In uLaw, these can be filled as well by just a couple of clicks. So you can just go accounts, document generation, and that's the fundamental difference that we want to point out. It's not just about filling court forms. It's about automating your entire process. So you can just say document generation, ledger, client trust. Maybe you want this month's entire trust ledger, and you can do a download. And to us, we view this as well as form, because if you're not using a software to actually do this, you need to maintain an Excel spreadsheet and actually fill in all this information. Like today, for example, it's Sally. So let's go all the way down to Sally. Here, Sally Sandra. So the retainer that you got, the trust transfer that you got, the balance in trust, you need to fill in all these things in a spreadsheet. Right now, we kind of bring that up and say, hey, we can fill this form for you. Same concept, we look at trust reconciliation. That's a form too that you need to fill on every end of the month. So, you need to put your bank balance, let's say, whatever the trust balance was. You need to mark which checks are not are outstanding, and you have to hit the download button. Now, when you hit the download button, if I look at the bookkeeping guidelines, they tell you how you have to actually do reconciliation statement. So they say, hey, this is a form that you need to fill too. You need to fill in these information, all the outstanding checks. You need to do what they call the client listing, and that we've automated those things as well. So for us, when we look at forms and automation, we bring in process automation, accounting forms automation, and the entire gamut of court forms automation, for different silos of practice. So that's, as you see, this is our trust reconciliation, pretty identical, outstanding checks, all your trust ledgers, everything is here. So it's no different from filling a court form. The drudgery is not just in court forms. The drudgery is there anytime it is something that you need to fill again and again and again. So with this, I'm going to open the phone lines, and, if you have any questions, we can take it from there. Hey, Praveen, I just opened the line, so if there's any questions for people, they can ask, or if you get any questions, on your email, let me know as well. I can address.
Hey, Dan, this is Praveen from the team.
Sorry, Praveen?
We received one question about family law.
Okay.
The question is, do we handle family law? The answer is yes.
Do we handle family law? Yes, of course we handle family. Though I think the person could have joined a little late. Family law was the first one that I actually showed. Yes, you can do farms and then family law, and then you can choose the farms. As you notice here, the family law has a lot of farms, and we automate every of them. Our latest introduction for people who join late is WSIB and accident benefits. And those two we are beta. The rest are, live. Any other question, Praveen?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. I do apologize if the audio line is not great. We would appreciate it if you could also type in your question on the chat window.
Yeah, but that's not that people actually ask.
No, he said type it.
Answer is yes.
That's a great question. Does uLaw run conflict searches? Absolutely, because there are two parts to conflict search. So the first and foremost is running the conflict search. The second part is actually producing a compliance report of the conflict search. And let me quickly show that. So Sally Sandra is the person. Actually, I didn't even make a spelling mistake. Let's say we add an extra one. Okay, and now let me run a quick conflict check. Now, conflict checks can be run at different levels. For example, you can say action conflict screening. You can do it at docket level, matter level. Let me just do it plainly at name level. And when you do that, the software looks at the entire database of all dockets, matters, names, notes that you have ever done in the software with respect to Sally, and it'll start pulling in people who it thinks are names, are mistakes. Like, for example, it picked out people who had, Sally. It also picked up people who had Sandra. It had people picked up whose first name is Sandra and last name of Sally is Sandra. And last one, it also picked names which are very close to Sally. Like, for example, Salty and Sally are close, and it says these are names similar. Now, this is one documentation that you need to produce to an auditor when he asks you, did you actually do conflict check? And you say, yes, I did it. Now, the second part is you go to the matter. Once you create the matter, you actually need to say, how did you resolve that conflict, or what did you do for this conflict? And so for that, we have a conflict screening report that you can run, and that report also has great details of things that you actually took care. Like, for example, the person who actually take the call. You can say, Judy took the call, right? Is there any extra notes? You can put that. Now, was she a new client? Like, conflict search information. So you can say, document, whatever, xxx.pdf, right? Has all that information. Who did it? Like, was done by myself, right? I mean, I would put the real name, but, what were the steps taken to resolve it? Was it conflict, confirm, or possible conflict? You can say no conflict. The reason why you declared no conflict can actually be put here. Refer the conflict to person or committee. You can say no, retainer was declined, no, and you can actually see it. Another question that's been asked is, hello, I noticed that in a cloud-based system, where is the security as far as privacy goes? Where is the data stored, and where does it remain in Canada? Good question. We are a Canadian company. We can very easily answer all these questions. Now, when it comes to security, as you see here, it is locked. And actually, I'm going to click on the lock and bring up, I'm going to bring up the certificate information. There you go. Our certificate is 256 SHA encrypted. Okay. And it clearly tells you, even Safari recognizes the trust level in the certificate, and the details are all here, how it was awarded to uLawPractice.com. Okay, so it's a GeoTrust certificate, and it gives you all the information. So anything that leaves your computer until it reaches us is 256-bit encrypted. Okay, and in our server, it is stored inside our database under your username and password. Now, your username and password cannot be some very, ordinary stuff. Like, for example, uLaw has very strict guidelines. Like, for example, if I just say jelly, sorry, I'm just using a jelly bean. It'll say it's a very weak password. I love to actually
Dan,
say.
could I request you to please mute the line, Dams, when you're talking?
Sorry?
Go ahead and please mute the line when you're talking, and maybe we could request questions through the chat window.
So if I have to actually type a very complex password to actually make it even now it's weak. I add a few capital letters, it's mediocre. To actually make it even strong. So it kind of realizes this is too random, so it kind of tells you, there you go. Something like that, which is like a paraphrase, it made it like a very strong password. I had to actually type quite a few numbers, digits, symbols, capitals, and small to actually get it into that combination. So that's as far as privacy goes. Now, about Canada, we are a Canadian company. Our support and development and everything is done in Ottawa, and our data centers are located in Montreal on the main island and one on the West Island. Okay, and our disaster recovery zone is actually Ottawa, which is 190 kilometers off Montreal. The requirement is it has to be 165 kilometers. So for the earthquake zone, so we are pretty much beyond the earthquake zone. So we're well covered, to answer all the questions that were asked there. I'll come back to presentation mode. So if anybody has a question, they can ask it, or you can always type on the chat window. Now, I was talking about automated form reports. If you don't like form reports, you can always look at uLaw Insights, and these are, information that is traditionally presented in a form format. We also presented it more in what we call an analytical insight manner. So even though we do form automation, very compliant with what the Law Society will want you in terms of audits and that, for consumption of the business, we can bring that exact same information into different formats as well. And you'll see once you do insights, it's exactly the same. Like, you saw the reconciliation statement. The reconciliation statement highlights several things here. Like, it tells you who are the people whom you have not transferred trust, who are the people who are actually, haven't paid you for such a long time. One of the main reasons why the Law Society is asking you to capture all these information is because it wants you to act upon them. It wants you to say, oh, yeah, I haven't, done a trust transfer for Kim Fisher for so many days. Now, if it's there in a form format, you can consume it, but we can also bring it to you in this kind of a format. We can say, hey, 956 days, someone has not done what she was supposed to do, an oldest paid invoice. So we can kind of bring out those kind of information, not just in form format, but also things like, the highest pending transfer. So for Walmart, for 51 days, you haven't done a pending transfer, so we can bring out that information as well.
What is the cost?
Someone asked the question, what is the margin of error? I don't understand what is the margin of error.
What is the cost of these services?
What is the flaw of these services?
Cost?
Oh,
yeah, the cost. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay. The cost.
Dan, you may have to mute the line. That's the challenge.
The cost of the service is $29. Let me just bring up our website and take you to our pricing policy. It's a very flat pricing policy. There's only three pricing policies that we have. First one is monthly, the second one is yearly, and the last and the final one is student. Let me take you through our pricing policy here. So if it's monthly, it's $39 a month. If it's annual, that is like you pay, there's no penalty. You just pay for one time. We charge you $348, which is $29 a month. And if you're a student, you get it for the first year at $25 a month. Student means like you have graduated, from your college or your law school, and you are articling in 2014 or 15. You'll get it at $25 a month for the first year. Then it becomes $29, in the second year, and in the third year, it actually becomes $39. Or you can actually go choose an annual subscription, and it'll remain at $29. So basically, three packages: $29 a month, $39 a month, or $25 a month, based on what kind of where you are with respect to your practice. If there are any other questions, the chat lines are always open, so you can go ahead. Okay, so somebody asked a question, what does the margin error mean? Is how often percentage basis will the program commit errors? I still don't understand the problem. It is a software, so there could be errors based on either data that was not inputted properly or issues with respect to that. But any accounting, we are pretty particular. Like, for example, you just did a trust transfer. If you try and do another trust transfer, the software will not even allow you to do that. So, like, for example, if I do action trust invoice payment transfer, it'll tell me like I'm not even allowed to do trust transfer. Look at that. It doesn't allow me to do that. Oh, even a simple one. Like, for example, somebody gave you money today, and you think you can go ahead and deposit that money in trust. In general, try doing that in the software. It will not even allow you. Look at that. You cannot even deposit the money because you haven't invoiced, right? So the software has a lot of workflow regulations put into place to prevent you from actually making errors. So I believe that's the way we catch it. Like, for example, let's say you got a retainer for $400, right? And for some reason, this person decided to actually move on, and you have to give him back and pay him back that money, from trust. Now, if you try to over-withdraw from trust, the software will prevent you. You can say action, refund retainer, okay? It immediately pulls out and says, that's the money left in trust. If you notice, we hadn't invoiced the full amount, it automatically knows that on top of the $400 that came, there was $60.15 left, and that's what you can do. Let me make that 16 cents. The software will correct it and say, nope, you can only withdraw $15. So we actually are pretty good in catching errors that you normally would have committed in an automated process and preventing you from actually doing it. So let me transfer $400, right? For some reason, I'm keeping that 65. And if I now try to transfer again, it'll now hold me for $60.15 only. Now, if I try to refund, it'll say $60.15 only. Same way, if I actually had a flat rate billing, say it's at closing, I had a flat rate billing of $60 and, actually this is going to be much more with HST. Now, if I actually try to raise an invoice and do a trust transfer, it'll not even allow you to do that. So to answer your question, the software actually prevents you from having errors rather than actually, committing the errors. Now, there could be some process flows and, where we might be more tight than what's expected. There's always possible, but, we have our support lines where if you can reach us and point to us, we can definitely work to actually correct those. It's, after all, finally a software, so, it is susceptible to things that we haven't thought of. So in this case, I'm going to try and do a trust transfer. See, it clearly spits and says only that much you're able to transfer. And if you actually try and transfer more, which is a very common error in the practice. So I have to transfer 67.98 because that's what I invoiced. You select it, the software says no, you can only transfer 60.15. So we try to enforce these business rules because these are the ones that will, at the end of the day, come and save you when you're actually doing audit. Any other questions? Now, just to go back to this one last question about margin of errors, I have to say, Ontario follows 13% HST, so you can always have cent rounding errors. Okay, I wouldn't say cent rounding errors, I would call it cent rounding issues, because we try to compute HST, but it always does not round up to exact amount. So there might be a plus or minus 1 cent, if that's what you were asking. Yeah, we can have a plus or minus 1 cent, but you should be able to choose to override those and say, I don't want to give away this cent, or I want to give away an extra cent. You can do that. We're pretty much close to our time. If there are any more questions, please, the chat lines, I'll keep it open for another 5 more minutes. Hi. Hey, Praveen, I think it's time for some final closing remarks. If you want to go ahead and give something, and then we can end the webinar.
You want to just say that?
I think Praveen is mobile. Let me just give my closing remarks. Thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar series. We already had one on the obligations. We have had a few on accounting principles, trust accounting with no accounting. This one is our third in the series on forms automation. The next one, we're planning to arrange one very soon on what we call analytics. Please check your email, or you can even register at our site for uLawPractice.com for check our site for more such information. I really want to thank everyone for giving us a warm Friday afternoon and hearing what we have to say. Thank you very much. I look forward to having you in our next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.